I wanted to ask you about something Carr said on X, formerly known as Twitter. He said he wants to dismantle a censorship cartel. And here he seems to be referring to, and actively referred to, Facebook, Google, Alphabet, and Microsoft. So we've been talking about the networks and news media, but what does his appointment mean for big tech?
I'd say still to be determined. What Brendan Carr has figured out is going after big tech is a really good way to raise your profile. Technically, the FCC doesn't have a lot of authority over content that goes over the internet, over the wires. That's how we want it. We don't want our federal regulators involved in the content. They have a role to play in the structures and making sure people have access to that, making sure people can afford to get online. They have a role to play when it comes to internet access and making sure that's available to everyone. But Brendan Carr seems to believe he has a bigger mandate. So even though the FCC doesn't regulate social media, he was one of the first people calling for TikTok to be banned. Now he's a little quieter about that because maybe Donald Trump has changed his mind, but he has gone out of his way on official government letterhead to essentially threaten these companies for censorship, but it's not entirely clear what he means, who's being censored. I think this brings us back to where we started, which this definition of censorship, of free speech, has suddenly become very malleable. And suddenly he's sort of accusing companies of actually what they're doing in his latest screed is fact checking, trying to evaluate for people what are the reliable sources of news and information. And Brendan Carr is signaling, wait, that might not be very good for my team, so I'm going to call that censorship. I'm going to go after it. The question that will face, I think, the Trump administration is this going to be an attempt to expand the FCC's authority, to actually try to get into the content regulation business where they haven't been before? But Brendan Carr is really signaling this is a priority for him. So is he going to try to use the Communications Act, Section 230 of the Communications Act, or go to Congress seeking some kind of regulatory authority for the internet that's never existed before? If he doesn't do that, I don't really know what he's doing besides honestly just continuing to try to get the attention of Trump and Musk and others.
As you talk about Musk throughout this conversation, we have a story on Forbes.com right now talking about how Carr has spoken out in favor of Musk and his companies, and indicating that Starlink could perhaps benefit from a friendlier FCC. The company lost out on nearly $1 billion in rural broadband subsidies under the current FCC. Mm-hmm. So what's your reaction to what an FCC under Carr could mean for Elon Musk and his fortunes?
Well, I think it's very good news for Elon Musk, and I think that's why Brendan Carr has this job. He's really recognized that was the way into the good graces of this administration, and Brendan Carr has been on a media tour accusing the FCC of regulatory harassment when it comes to Elon Musk, which is preposterous. What the FCC did is they actually investigated a bid that Elon Musk made to provide broadband services and discovered that the areas he was proposing to serve in exchange for billions of dollars in taxpayer money were places that didn't actually require a federal investment in broadband. They were golf courses and airport runways and highway medians. These weren't actually places where people lived that didn't have access to service. So what the Biden FCC did is they said, well, wait a minute, we don't need to spend $2 billion to do this. That's not a good use of taxpayer money. You don't have a plan, Elon Musk, Starlink, to actually provide this service. So we're not going to just hand you this money. Suddenly that's become a narrative of like, this was taken away from Elon Musk. I mean, I'm old enough to remember a Republican Party that was concerned about wasting taxpayer dollars. But for Brendan Carr, it really depends, well, whose dollars are they and where they're going. If they're going to Elon Musk and we're on the same team, it's regulatory harassment. If they're going to lower costs of the broadband for low-income Americans, well, then suddenly it's a huge waste. And I think that tells you something about Carr's priorities.